All right, here is a 3D printed version of the spoiler, the wing upright. Now what I'm gonna do is try and cut this out of 6mm carbon fiber sheet. Never milled carbon before. We'll see how it goes, so let's give this a shot.
Hi everybody, how are you? My name is Dan Dulac and welcome to my channel where I am building a V10 powered Ultima Evolution convertible. This is episode number 57. If you missed any of the previous episode, especially episode number 56, where I drove the Ultima for the very first time on the street, be sure to go back and check out those episodes, get you caught up on where we are today. Winter has set in here in New England, so it's pretty cold outside, so I won't be driving the car anytime soon. They just laid salt out on the road last night, so won't be driving the car out on the street until spring. But in the meantime, we've got a lot of work left on particularly the rear end of this car to finish up in time for spring. On this episode, we're gonna focus on mounting up the Voltex rear spoiler. This is a different spoiler than what comes with the factory kit. It's a swan neck style spoiler, and I've done some customization work on it as well, all of which we're gonna cover in this episode. So without further ado, let's jump right into it.
So I'm getting ready to modify and customize the rear end here for the swan neck spoiler that I have. This is a Voltex rear spoiler. It's a single element. The one that comes with the Ultima kit is actually a dual element, and its mounts are wider apart than this swan neck spoiler. So I have to modify the rear end on this and build some extra structure for the wing to mount to. So first let me show you what the kind of the factory setup is. So these are aluminum plates that you simply put in here, somewhat like this. You bolt through the side of the fiberglass here, there, and then punch 2 holes through the fiberglass. And then these are the wing mounts, and then these would mount up under, just like that, into the fiberglass. These are pretty substantial. These are actually very, very nice mounts, wing mounts. But I'm not gonna use these because I'm gonna use my swan neck spoiler. So as a result, I have to build some framing and so forth in here. I've already marked out where I'm gonna have to cut the slits for the swan neck uprights. You see there, and again, they're about 4 inches more inward on each side than the factory wing mounts. So that's what we're up to. Some builders have had situations where this hole here where it bolts into the fiberglass is the weak point, because again, all the wing downforce is translated right to this point. I'm gonna do something a little bit different to distribute the load down through the fiberglass and so forth. So I'll show you that once we get to it, but let's get after it. All right, I've got the rear clam off the car. I am getting ready to cut the holes and put some aluminum framing underneath for the spoiler. The 2 yellow tape marks, that's the general area where I'll cut the slits for the spoiler uprights. And then where you see the thin green lines, I'm gonna put some 3/4 inch aluminum tubing, square tubing under there, make a little bit of a frame. Panel bond the frame to the underside of the fiberglass, and then mount it similar to what the factory manual prescribes as well. Here's the aluminum tubing I have. 3/4 inch tubing, 1/16 wall. I actually bought 1 inch tubing with 1/8 inch wall, but it's pretty substantial. It's gonna add a fair bit of weight to the back of that. So I think this tubing, 1/16 wall, 3/4 inch, bonded to the underside of the chassis, I think that's gonna be plenty strong. And the way I'm thinking about doing this is creating somewhat of a ladder under there. 2 pieces here, and then where the uprights go, I'll do a cross member piece here, cross member piece here, and then the uprights will bolt to the sides of that cross member with rib nuts. And then on the end, I'll integrate a piece that comes across and then bolts to the side of the reinforced fiberglass that's underneath, kind of where the factory recommends you mount the wing as well. So That's what I'm gonna do. That's gonna give you an idea of the framing that I'm gonna put and glue underneath the clam to give that spoiler a lot of support and take the stress off the fiberglass. Got the rear clam here sitting upside down. So here's what I came up with. Here is the frame. I made some notches in here so it'll kind of follow the contour of the body. Let me show you how this goes in here. So I've got marker lines all set up in here. The center line goes something like that. So you can see I put a little notch bend, welded the bend there so it'll kind of follow the contour of the body lines. Same thing over here, over there. So I'm gonna panel bond this, and then the uprights will bolt. I'll put 3 rib nuts here, 3 rib nuts here, and then cut a slit for the upright to go through. And then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna design and cut on my CNC machine an adapter that bridges the frame here and then comes up to a point here. And I'm gonna reinforce this all with aluminum as well, all the way to the heim joint that bolts to the frame, to the chassis. So all the load will get translated from the frame to the machined upright. I'm gonna fabricate, and then I'm gonna put a piece of aluminum all the way up so that all that downward force translates through the aluminum, not the fiberglass. So that took a few hours of fabrication. Just had to make sure I had my markings right, my alignment right, make sure I put the bends in the right spots, but that's gonna actually fit pretty nice. Here are the brackets that will go here on the framing. I will weld these to the lower aluminum frame. I'm going to do a rib nut and a piece of aluminum that will go all the way up. All right, here is a 3D printed version of the spoiler, the wing upright that I have custom designed. The uprights here tilt backwards, and I wanted a different upright to change the orientation of the wing a bit. So this is more kind of the classic swan neck style. So 3D printed this so I could test fit it against the wing, all good. Now what I'm gonna do is cut this out of 6mm carbon fiber sheet. I've got it fixtured up here on my CNC machine, and I'm gonna cut this shape out. There's actually 2 nested on this one sheet. So we're gonna cut it out. First thing I'm gonna do is actually mill the holes first, the 3 on the bottom, the 2 slots on the top for both brackets, and then they fall somewhere kind of randomly in here. Then what I'll do is use some wood screws and screw down to the plywood base I've got here. I'm gonna be obviously milling through the bottom, and it's just gonna mill into the wood a little bit, and that's totally fine. But those wood screws will help secure, so when it does start to mill the perimeter, of these uprights, it will give it some more stability. So I've never done this before. I'm gonna hook up my vacuum. This carbon dust is nasty, so I'm gonna try and keep the dust to a minimum. Put an extra fine filter on my shop vac and then mount the shop vac in here. I might even just hold the shop vac next to the end mill here just to suck up as much dust as possible, and I'll be wearing a mask. So anyways, let's give this a shot. Never milled carbon before. I've got a carbide tip on here. This is the same tip that you would use on steel. So I'll be using that, and we'll see how it goes. So let's give this a shot. To run this one more time, change the program a little bit. I didn't go deep enough, so these holes and slots are only 5.6 deep. They need to go at least 6, probably 6.5, just to make sure it goes through and into the wood, so it's nice clean all the way through. But you can see how those came out. I still got the plastic coating on the top of this. That's what you see here, just plastic that'll peel off once this is all cut. So I'm going to adjust the program, rerun it so the holes go all the way through, and then we'll run the second program, which will cut out the shape of those swan neck spoiler uprights. Eureka this time. Holes went all the way through the wood. And again, now what I'm gonna do is just use these wood screws, go through the plywood, secure it down. I'm gonna have to move one of these mounts over there out of the way. Same with this one, move it over here, but with the screws in place, that will hold it down to the plywood. Not bad. Nice sharp edges. I'm just gonna sand the burrs off the edges there, but other than that, these things came out tip top. The hole didn't go all the way through on this side, but barely. So just put the drill bit through that and clean that up. But man, those came out nice. Very rigid. 6mm carbon fiber. These will make the perfect uprights. Roll these edges over with some sandpaper. They'll be good to go. I've got this wing upright fixtured up again because what I want to do now is I want to cut a slot in the edge of this. A little 2mm slot, about 2 millimeters deep, along the back edge of this upright here because of my wiring. So I've got the LED brake light wires that are going to follow that upright, and I want these wires to tuck into the slot. So with the slot there, I can tuck the wires in and then just do a bead of silicone to seal that in, and then the wires will be completely hidden. So that's what I'm up to over here. I think I've got the program set right. A little bit tricky, but we're gonna give this a go. So let's do it. I have got the spoiler all mocked up with its frame, and you can see how it's sitting there. Man, does that look awesome. Carbon swan neck uprights bolted in. See, I've got the uprights, put some riv nuts in the tubing, and then with M6 screws, some washers, bolted that in on both sides. That looks fantastic. So if you can imagine this whole setup in the clam, that's what's next. I bond that frame to the underside of the clam. These triangle mounts will go right there. All the downforce will go onto this nut and then be distributed along the fiberglass since I'll be bonding that. So there'll be no kind of single point of failure there. And this thing is ready to go. So next up, I've got to cut some slits. I've got them marked out here. This is where the uprights will pass through the rear clam. So we'll cut these slits in place, and then we can get all of this stuff bonded together. So I did buy a couple things of panel bond here. One is structural adhesive. So I'm actually going to use this along the base. I'll use structural adhesive there. There are some gaps there, so I can't get a tight fit. So in my research and reading, the structural adhesive will work better there. It's impact resistant as well, so with any vibration that comes through the spoiler or the wing uprights, it will deal with that really well. And this I will use where I have a nice tight fit up and down those vertical slats there, and that should work well. So that's that, and all I gotta do is finish weld this, and this will be ready to bond in place. I've got the factory wing on the left and my Voltex aftermarket wing on the right. That's gooseneck versus undermount. Factory wing is dual element. Voltex is single element. But I just wanted to put them both up here so you guys could compare. There's, I think, pros and cons of each. I'm obviously going to put on the Voltex wing. I've got the LEDs integrated into the uprights, which is trick. And I do like the gooseneck style, kind of like in the RS model as well. So you can also see the mounts are somewhat different. So you can see the uprights over here on the gooseneck are closer together by about 6 inches on each side, which changes the mounting points in the rear clam. So that's why I am having to build this aluminum frame setup here. These uprights will simply pass through the fiberglass and bolt to this aluminum frame, whereas the factory mounts certainly substantial. Those are nicely machined parts, but you can see it bolts through and sits on top of the fiberglass, and then there's an aluminum bracket that goes from underneath the fiberglass to mount to those two bolt holes. It's supported. Some builders have reported some spider cracking on the gel coat as a result of this mount sitting directly on the fiberglass. So that's another reason that I put this frame together. Again, given that the mounting points are narrower, the gooseneck mounting point's about 6 inches narrower on either side. I also wanted to mount it this way to take the pressure or a lot of the force off the top side of the fiberglass, the gel coat side. And then with this panel bonded all the way across, it should distribute the load across the fiberglass. And then of course, with my aluminum mounts here and how I'm gonna set that up, that should be good shape. So that's the current setup. I'm gonna weigh these things too. I'm curious what the weight difference is between these two. They're both very light. I've got the carbon fiber uprights versus the substantial aluminum machined uprights that are on the factory wing. And I do like how the wing adjustment on this is with little heim joint screws. That is really trick. I think that is a cool little addition to there, so you can adjust the tilt, the angle of the wing, which is pretty trick. So anyway, pros and cons of each. I'm thinking I'm actually gonna make a set of mounts for this that angle in, so I can make these interchangeable. If I get tired of this one, I can move to this one. You can see the size difference of the end plates as well. Factory wing and then the aftermarket Voltex wing. And Voltex actually makes different end plates for this as well. And ultimately, since it's just a flat piece of carbon fiber, I can really machine any shape end plate that I want, just like I did here with the uprights. Creativity is my only limit. Anyways, figured I'd give you a quick description of the wings there that I get to play with. All right, I've got this spoiler set up all ready to bond to the rear clam here. I've sanded all the bond joints here with 60 grit, and also on the underside 60 grit as well, anywhere it's going to bond with the structural adhesive. So that's done. I've got the uprights here as well. These are the aluminum reinforcement posts, and these I've sanded with 60 grit as well. And I've also got just some rivet holes in there that I'll use just as a really kind of an alignment and a way to hold this down, clamp it down really good while that structural adhesive bonds up. So we are ready to go. I've got my holes cut in here, so off camera I cut the slits for the gooseneck uprights. So those came out really nice and aligned, ready to go. So we are ready to get the structural adhesive going. I've got 2 tubes of it. Hopefully that's enough, and we'll get this going. So time to bond this sucker in place. I've got this bonded in there. I think it came out pretty good. All the key spots, especially on the ends, some good bond around that square. And then of course, up the vertical load-bearing aluminum. So starting to set up. I think I have like 90 minutes work time with that stuff. So it should be good to go. So I just put the uprights in there temporarily, as you can see, just to make sure they were centered on the slots and in the right position before this thing cures. So I think we're in good shape. All right, we're gonna let this set up. Then we can flip this thing over and get the wing mounted. I cannot wait to see it. This is where I put a dab of that structural adhesive. It turns purple when it's cured, and that is rock hard. So let's go see what this looks like on the car. And it's looking good. So I don't know if the camera picks up the color. It's like a purple violet color, and that baby is on there. That's perfect. So next thing I think I'm gonna do, I haven't decided if I want to fiberglass over the top of this. I'm definitely gonna do heat shield. So I'm gonna do some riv nuts along the top and then make some heat shield, a large heat shield panel, similar to the panel like I did here on the car. It's DEI, fiberglass backed insulation or shield, and then I take a piece of single ply aluminum and stick it on the back to make a panel. And then you can see I could secure it with some small screws. Thinking of doing the exact same thing over here on the back side. Just put some heat shielding right over the top of that. So haven't quite decided whether I'm gonna take the effort to fiberglass this in. It does require a special treatment all along the aluminum, since the epoxy doesn't bond naturally to aluminum very well at all. But there is a technique to do that I'll show you if I get there. So I've also got to patch in this. I had to cut this spot out for the exhaust header clearance. So I've got to close this in with some fiberglass. I also put in this center support beam here that you can see. That's just 3D printed. I bonded this with the structural panel bond as well. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna carbon fiber skin this, because this you actually see through the top side of the engine when this is on the car. And I figured this would give us kind of it fills in the gap along the top of the engine. And with this carbon fiber, I think would look pretty trick. Very subtle detail, but I think that will come out nice. So we've got some bonding to do. We've got to bond in the NACA ducts onto the openings as well. Got that yet to do. So we've got a fair bit to do, but the hard part is over. We've got the spoiler frame in place. Now what I think I'm gonna do is flip the rear clam upside down so it's right side up, and fit the uprights and the wing and get our first glimpse at what this is gonna look like. So let's flip this over and assemble the wing. I've got the back wing on this car. You saw a few shots of me putting it together. Now it's time to show you what it looks like. You ready for it? And there it is. Swan neck style rear wing. Voltex with the large end plates. I think that looks awesome. The mounting situation down here came out really nice. Just some slits in the bodywork there. Super clean. And the wing mounted up great. Perfectly centered. Uprights are perfectly vertical. And I'm really happy with how that turned out. So we're gonna put the rear clam on the car and see what this looks like on the chassis. So let's do it. All right guys, here we go. The rear end of this thing is basically all mocked up. I think that looks insanely good. Every angle of this, I just love that wing, the vents. Car looks insane. Sorry for the harsh shadows. Fall, sun's low in the sky this time of year in New England. But man, it looks awesome. Beautiful carbon on the wing. Came out beautiful. Just checking the clearance under with my frame here. Up under here, see it just clears the rear lid of the airbox. Clears the exhaust, no problem. Clears the lid on that side. Upright, clears everything. So it came out really, really nice. Clears everything just perfectly. Super happy.